You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Break Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Michael Gardon. If you've ever wondered how a teacher stuck in a classroom making $40,000 a year can transform into a world-roaming remote nomad making over $100,000 inside of 12 months, well, you're in the right place. Taylin Simmonds was a music producer and college educator who broke his career and now helps founders and leaders of high-growth companies grow their personal brands. And he does it while traveling the world. In fact, we recorded this episode while Taylin was in Panama. I just love connecting with young folks like Taylin who are thinking hard and deep about their future and taking bold steps to transform their lives to work with purpose. If you had any doubts that you could make a gigantic change in your circumstances in a short amount of time, you need to tune into this amazing episode with my new friend, Taylin Simmonds.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
Taylin, welcome back to the show. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday, Mike. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be back.
Excellent. Yes, for everybody who is wondering why I'm saying back, Taylin and I tried to record this a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, and I had a failure. I had some audio issues, unfortunately, or we did somewhere in the process. And so we lost it. And Taylin has been gracious enough to come back on and go through the whole deal with me again so you guys can get all of his wisdom. So I really, really appreciate that. I saw that you recently had a birthday. I want to know how old you are.
Yeah, I turned 29 last week. So I'm approaching 30. This is the last year of the 20s.
All right. The reason I asked is I'm 41 and I'm so excited when I see, like, one of my missions in life, I feel like, is to get people to realize their true path much earlier in the process than I did, right? Beat my former self kind of thing. And so I'm super pumped when I see somebody that I consider young, and I say 29 is pretty young, on that mission and doing it. So I wanted to point that out to everybody as a way to hopefully inspire some people to take some action right away, very early, and leapfrog my progress. So I really got interested in you when I read this. 7 months ago, I was a college teacher making $40,000 a year, and I barely made enough to pay my bills. All I wanted was to make $100K per year while working remotely, but my job didn't award me that luxury. So I want to tackle this remote part first, because that was about 12 months ago where you weren't getting any of that done. Tell people where in the world you are right now.
Right now I'm in Panama, working remotely after being in Medellin, Colombia, and probably going to go to the Bahamas and Miami in a month or two, take like a good break from work after pretty much just slaving away the first half of the year. But it's, I quit my job in December as a teacher. So I've been full-time entrepreneur now for almost like 4 months, just like doing the whole work remote thing. And I can honestly say I cannot go back. It's just, I've taken the red pill, I guess.
I wanted to point that out. I love it because that was your dream, or that was how you envisioned some success. And in very short order, you're putting that plan into reality. So Panama, why Panama?
Mainly just a spot that we decided to settle down. We're just like, hey, let's just go monk mode. It's me and 2 other internet entrepreneurs. And we were just looking for a place to go monk mode. And this just happened to be where we ended up settling down. But, one thing I will add about the quitting my college teaching job is I remember back, actually a year ago, it didn't even seem like it was possible to leave that job. Like, that's one thing that I think people maybe don't understand about it is when I'm just like, oh, all I wanted to do was quit my job and make 10K a month. Like, I remember being in a place where that just seemed like absolutely impossible. I was like, how would I do it? What skills would I need to develop? what should I be doing now? Like, am I heading in the right direction? There's all this doubt that like what you're doing isn't even going to work. It's like, well, if I go and do like Amazon FBA, like, is that even a thing anymore? To make money online, you kind of can fall into like the guru trap where you pay all these gurus to try to learn how to make money online. And it's one thing I try to remember is, even though it took me, I'd say it took me almost like a year to pull it off, to get to the 10K a month online, knowing like absolutely nothing. There was definitely a point where I didn't even know if it was possible or how I would do it. So it's crazy to think that that's where I started. Wasn't like I was just like, oh, I'm just going to do this and make 10K a month. It's like I had no freaking clue if it was even going to work.
Yeah, I see that over and over again. I think that's what keeps a lot of people on that default path, is when they think about it in their minds forward. They're like, I wish I could do something, but I either don't know where to start. I don't have any framework for kind of figuring out what I should be doing, or how to test things, or how to know I'm on the right path. Was there anything that stuck out? And I would definitely want to dig into some of your story, your backstory, and where you were and how that all went. But since you mentioned it, was there anything on your journey that you really picked up that you pinpointed as very helpful to you getting to figuring it out?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back even a little bit further to where this core idea came from. Is when I was in my early 20s, I was like even worse off. I was just like, okay. I remember coming home one time, I was making like almost no money. I was working at a post office, like barely scraping by. And I wasn't very happy. I was very miserable. And that was my reality. That's like all that I've known up to that point. And I remember thinking like, okay, well, anyone who's successful like must be an asshole, or they're a cheat, because you don't want to take the responsibility, right? The default to not wanting to take the responsibility for your own crappy situation is to play the victim.
Yeah.
And I started reading Tony Robbins, and in reading it, there was this thought that like clicked in for me. I don't even know what he said that triggered it, but I'm like, wait, if success is possible for someone else, that's proof that it's possible for me. And that's like one thing that has like underpinned all my thinking since then. Was when I was a college teacher, I'm like, okay, well, I want to make 10K a month online so I can work from anywhere. Like, if I can find proof in the world that someone else has done it, then theoretically I should just do the same thing and it should work. And that was my starting point. So I say that the precursor to success is faith, because you have to have faith not only that it's possible, but the extra layer is you have to have faith that it's possible for you. Because that's where some people get stuck. They're like, oh, well, that guy's successful, but it's because he's like born smarter, he's rich parents, or like any kind of excuse they can think of. But once you actually have faith, like, this is possible for me, how am I going to do it? You have to find someone who has already done it and either connect with them so they can teach you, or deconstruct with all the content that you can find and start to walk that path. And that was essentially what worked for me with Twitter. Was this guy named Liam Kircher. I met him and he had pulled it off on Twitter, and he became my North Star. Like, if it's possible for him, it's possible for me.
I love that idea of a North Star and modeling that behavior. I think those are great places to start. I think about all these other, things that we can do to create more confidence and more belief in ourselves. And, I think one, just in addition to what you said, one is kind of really understanding yourself and being very clear about your advantages and your disadvantages, and how you can then, and thinking creatively then of how you can use those to create a better path. And the second is really kind of, that experimental mindset, right? That kind of underpins a lot of really good entrepreneurs, a lot of designers, a lot of great investors too. That idea that I'm going to take a really small risk. So I'm going to try to figure out how to chunk this down so I can build what I call like that belief flywheel, right? And get that flywheel going of, I can do this thing. I think those are really helpful as well. I use the concept of like, we are wayfinders. We are trying to find our way. And so that North Star, having that ideal person or situation that you are trying to figure out where that is, but you know where it is and you're trying to figure out how to get there, like, is so powerful. So I really appreciate you going in there on that with me. So let's start. I want to start getting into the backstory, because we kind of teed it up pretty good. And we know you're a guy that has taken some action and made a pretty big transformation. So we mentioned college educator, but go back even further. What were you doing, first job out of college, what was your first kind of big career?
First big career out of college for me was actually a music producer, which sounds crazy to say, but I went to college for music back in the day, music production for dance music specifically. And while I was there, I ended up meeting this guy who was starting a record label, and he had a lot of funding. And he was like, hey, I need like a right-hand man to be like the A&R, the producer, to oversee everything. And he ended up hiring me like right out of college full time to just produce music for like 3 or 4 years. And it was probably the craziest, most enlightening experience I could have as an early 20-year-old. Because I think I was 20 when I took the job on. Yeah, because I couldn't go to Vegas for the first big show because I couldn't drink. So like, I could go with them, but I couldn't go into anywhere that they were going. So I remember not being able to go. But what was crazy was this guy was quite wealthy. So he drove like a G-Wagon, like quite an expensive vehicle that would like, people, it's like head would turn when you're like driving in it. People would always stop and want to take pictures with it. He lived in this like multi-million-dollar house. And the thing that was really fascinating about that experience at an early age is that is like the experience that everyone like chases as like a cliche. Is I want the really nice car, the expensive car. I want the house. I want the status. I want like when I walk into the club, everyone turns and looks at me. But what was eye-opening about it was working there for like 3 years. To this day, there's only one person that I still talk to from that experience. And it was the guy who hired me because we became such close friends. And I asked him the same thing, like, do you still talk to anybody from back in the record label days? He's like, one person maybe that he just happens to still stay in touch with. And we found like people always wanted to hang out with us. People wanted to be there. They wanted to be at the house, but they didn't want to be there to hang out with us. They liked showing up and like taking Instagram pictures in the house and being like, hey, I'm driving in the back of a G-Wagon. So you end up being liked for what you have and not for like who you are. It's almost like people want to just be affiliated with your success because it makes them feel important. And when you step away from it, those same people just won't be around because they just don't care about you for you. And that I think was really important because there's this idea from Naval that desires, people always just say like, oh, just like let go of your desires, just be a monk, become enlightened and just be like, I don't need the Lamborghini. It's so much easier to say that when you don't have it. But once you've experienced something and you know what the reality's like, it's a lot easier to let that desire go. So now I'm like moving through my life and I have almost no crazy desire for any like material possessions at all. Cause I know it doesn't bring me the approval that I want. Not somebody liking me for me, appreciating me for who I am, like sticking with me through all the tough times. It's just going to attract the people who want to be affiliated with like my quote unquote success. So it was very enlightening to experience that at 21 and be like, oh, everyone else like spends their whole life chasing this and the reward sucks. I'm very grateful for that experience.
Yeah, I think that you make a really interesting point. We tend to get a lot of that type of advice from people who we do see as successful, right? And I think a lot of people say, well, it's easy for them to say that. Like they already have all this wealth and they're telling me that none of this matters or whatever. But it's actually, we need to listen to that because they are the only ones who have experienced it. And it's a lot like, like what you feel like you need to go buy a car, buy a nice car. And after a week, you don't care about it anymore. It's like that buyer's remorse kind of a thing. And I think until we build these up in our minds and until you've experienced that and experienced the lack of satisfaction or the lack of true happiness that it brings, it's hard to understand. So we do need to really, I always tell people like, you got to really listen to people who are different than you and alternate points of view. You can learn a lot from them and don't discount somebody just because they are successful. And it's not that they have just got to this pulpit where they're successful so they can say whatever they want. That's not true. A lot of what they're feeling and what they're expressing is true. And we can learn from that. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Trying to think if I have anything to add to that.
Well, so what I was going to ask is that you had this sort of feeling of not being authentic, being a little unaligned with that entire career path. And that some kind of for some reason led you to more becoming like a college teacher. So maybe you can go into that a little bit and how that transition was.
That's another really big realization I had in my early 20s that I hope other people have this one like really soon, is that the reality never really meets like the expectation that you have of it,
right?
Just in any regard. Like, I always said, like, when I was becoming a music producer, there was this thing in like the very back of my head that's like, you don't really want to do this. But I was like, no, like I do. It'd be really cool. I could just wake up every day. I could write music. I could get paid to travel the world. I could, I'd have this like really amazing group of friends that I could travel with. It would just be so much fun. Like life would be insane. And then when I finally got it and I was traveling, playing shows, I was like hanging out with like good music producing people that were like, I did enjoy like a lot of them that I met, and just writing music every day. I just like didn't like it for some reason. Like I never hopped out of bed and was like, I can't wait to like go write this music. I can't wait to go play this show. Like it very much felt like work. So in a lot of ways, it didn't feel any different than just getting up to work another job. It was just a different job. And that was so eye-opening for me, because what I asked myself was, okay, let's say that I made up this kind of story in my head that I'm not happy pursuing music, but once I get it, I will be happy. Now, imagine instead of me accomplishing it at 21, I accomplished it at like 35. And I bought into that story for that amount of time. Like maybe a more grounded example I think of is retirement. I think for a lot of people, they're like, yeah, I don't like this job, but like when I retire, my life is going to be so good. Like I'm going to be able to just wake up when I want, do what I want. Like I have all this freedom. And I get the feeling that those people are like, when they get to retirement, they're just like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be like. So the whole like overarching kind of idea of that is like the reality of when you reach a destination is never better than the journey itself. Like if anything, that's like the worst part. You want to find something that you genuinely enjoy doing day to day and just map that out across your whole life. Because I think a lot of people will chase things until like 40, 50, 60. And it will be then that they realize, oh crap, I did not enjoy that. And I don't enjoy the destination. Like what the heck did I do this for? That's where you'd get like the quarter life crisis or midlife crisis, right? So for me, I ended up transitioning into being a college teacher, because even when I was a kid, I told my mom I wanted to be a teacher when I was like very, very young. So I'm like, yeah, I think this would be fun. And up until I became an entrepreneur, that was my favorite job that I had ever worked. It just happened to not allow me a lot of freedom and didn't pay very well. But it was actually quite a fun, enjoyable, like day-to-day job that I enjoyed working for 7 years.
Yeah. So it feels like the key to living a good, balanced entire life is not putting off your happiness, like not delaying it. Right. And part of that seems to be, I think, a lot of us, we try to use our brains too much, right? We say, oh, well, this, we look at the world and the map of the world and we say, oh, this is the path. Like this is what success is. Look at all of these people pursuing success in this way, which is, money, status, or whatever, all of these things. And we haven't everybody I talk to, they have a nagging feeling, in their heart, in their gut, that what they were doing wasn't right for some reason. And we're not listening to that. Right. And that's the piece of us, that intelligence, if you will, that's saying, no, we need to try to do something else to be happy. Because I think your retirement example is so interesting, and how you equated it to being 20 and saying you made to the destination at 35. Like that's 15 years of your life, some of the best years of your life, some of the healthiest years of your life. And when people get to retirement, they're like, I can't move the way I want to anymore. I don't have the energy to go travel the world sometimes. And so not putting off that happiness, but trying to find ways to infuse it in everyday life, I think is where we need to try to go. Was there a moment in this transition? Obviously, there was a lot of big insights that you were learning and good questions you were asking yourself. But was there a moment or a story that was that moment where you knew you couldn't do this music thing anymore, and being a professor was or being in college and teaching was going to be what was going to bring you more happiness?
Yeah, I definitely had a bit of like a blow up moment, but it was a slow progression where I was, I spent 10 years on music. So it was a very hard thing to walk away from. Like, even though internally I'm like, maybe I'm not happy doing this. Maybe I'd rather be doing something else. I kept having this like question, like, but was it all for nothing then? Like if I pivot now and I go into something else, like this was all for nothing. Like I can't let this be for nothing. This was a decade of my life. So it's very hard to let go of those things. I can imagine athletes feel that way when they leave like college or like college sports or something, and maybe they don't make it to that NHL, NBA or whatever it is. And they're like, well, what do I do? Just go get a job now? Like was all the sports just for nothing? And that made it very, very hard to transition out. But I was so worked to like death, and I wasn't like being healthy. I was drinking multiple coffees a day and like Red Bulls. Like my literal like generic combo for focus was a large coffee and a Red Bull, like whenever I needed to focus, which is just so much caffeine. And I ended up hospitalized, and the doctor was like, you can't work. You got to be on bed rest, man. And I was like, fuck, like, I don't know if I want this anymore. I was like, I think I'm ready for something more sustainable, something not like so pressure intensive. So I went back to my old college and was like, hey, I learned all this stuff. I would love to rewrite the curriculums and bring it so I can still do music, just in a new medium. And I can teach it. And they were like, well, we already have our instructor, but like sayonara. And I didn't really have any job to work. So I actually went back to working at the post office for a while. I think I did that for like 6 to 9 months, where I was like kind of writing music on the side, just working at the post office, thinking about my life and where I was going to go next. And one day I just got an email like, hey, we let go of that instructor. Do you want the job? And I came in, interviewed for it, and they gave it to me on the spot. And that's when I started teaching. And that was really killer. So that was the story of how that happened. I hit like a really big tipping point where the emotions of doing the job were just like so negative that it caused that kind of tipping point. But one thing I do want to kind of like wrap up though, in that when I say like leaving things behind is really difficult, what I've learned more recently that makes it really easy is if you look at like the core skills or the principles of what you've developed or the network, it's never like, you're never like really leaving it behind. You're just altering the medium. So for example, like being a music producer, that was the first thing I ever mastered or like came close to mastery was music. Like it became very subconscious, very second nature. I could just sit down, I could just do it. It actually became kind of like easy to do something that would be seemingly hard. And that was really eye-opening because then when I pursued the next thing, which was teaching, it reminded me what it was like to be a beginner again. And I'm like, oh, but I also know what it's like to be the master in a domain where people look at you as like that expert. So then I got to map out the path to mastery within teaching, and then teaching became really easy. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, how do I make teaching, like, how do I translate these skills? So like, I just think about that all the time now is what's like the core, more fluid skills you're learning or the identity or the thing that you really like. Like there's this last chapter in Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I think is the best chapter of the whole book, but no one agrees with me. So maybe I'm wrong, but it's like, is the part where he talks about identity and related to your habits. And that if you have like a fixed identity, that's like, I am a musician or like, I am a music producer. Like that is what I identify as. It is very hard to change. But if you have a more like fluid identity, like I am someone who likes to do creative work. I'm someone who likes to pursue mastery in different domains. Well, now I'm not like losing myself when I pivot. And I remember that now, even as an entrepreneur, is I try not to say things like, I am a ghostwriter. It's like, that's too rigid. It's like, I am a creative writer. I'm an artist. Like, what's the most like broad stroke of it? Just to say, I am an artist and an entrepreneur. Because think of all the things I could pivot into now without feeling this attachment to what I'm doing and like I'm going to lose myself. There's like the whole world opens up and your skills become more transferable.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
I would say like in the work that I do, helping to coach people through like career change, basically, it's that what you described is what is one of the things that holds people back. And it's, there's a term for it. It's the sunk cost fallacy, right? It's this idea that because we've invested so much in a path, we have to keep going on that path or it's not worth it, right? And the actual calculus in your brain needs to be on the next incremental investment. Is that worth it, right? And could you be happier, more productive, more successful in another way? So that's kind of like a financial concept that applies to that situation. And what you said about fluid identity is essentially how we get people over that hump. That's why I talk about advantage so much. What are your skills and attributes that you may have learned on that job, or who you were there, but how can you use those, for an advantage, to create an advantage for you in another domain? It's that fluidity, and people have a hard time. And it's a creative process, actually, and people have a hard time with it. But you're absolutely right. I love that idea of a fluid identity. It makes so much sense.
I've never thought about that in relation to creativity. So like my definition of creativity would be linking unrelated things or seemingly unrelated things. So I guess you're right that if you were taking a skill in like one area and linking it to another area, like that is creativity. Yeah, that's interesting that someone who's maybe not as much of a creative thinker might not be able to think outside the box like that. Like, what are my transferable skills? So yeah, that's a cool little nugget. You taught me something new.
Well, good. Yeah. I mean, I think I've never thought of myself as a really creative person, but I'm a very horizontal thinker. And I love that idea, the idea of being able to take and combine basically creativity through combination. And, I think that's the magic. It's like, okay, I am good at spreadsheets. Does that mean I have to be an accountant or in finance? No, I could take that, this is a really stupid example, but like I could take that skill and I could start to teach people how to create, be like the COO of their life or their small business or whatever, because I'm really organized. And that's a new thing. Like it's a different way of manifesting what and seeing how you are. So I think it's creativity, and I think that gets people out of the box of I am just this one thing.
100%. That's very cool.
All right, man. So the only one other thing I wanted to ask about your transition from music to teaching. You mentioned that from a really young age, you told your mom you wanted to be a teacher. Talk to me about the time capsule.
Yeah, the time capsule. So when I was in kindergarten or preschool, we buried like a time capsule there. And I think we had to write, it was 3 things we had to write down. It's like, what job will you do? What will you be doing? And I think there's like one other thing, but I can't quite remember. And, it's something you completely forget about, especially doing that when you're that young. And a couple of years ago, my dad just like calls me. He's like, hey, I got a call from your like school. They dug up your time capsule and I have your piece of paper. And I was like, oh, that's funny. What does it say that I'll be doing? And he said, it says that you'll be driving your car, hanging out with your friends. And, what was the other one? It was something like working on your computer, I think is what it was. Cause I was always kind of like a techie kid. Like I love computer games. That's back in like the dial-up days when I was a kid. Like that's how I remember computers. And I was like, yeah, I guess it's kind of true. I drive my car, hang out with my friends, and I'm a music producer on my computer. Like, I guess that's not far off.
I thought there was something else in there from our first conversation about like writing to help people. I thought there was something like that. I could be wrong, but I thought there was something like that in there as well, which is sort of what you're doing today.
Yeah, it might have been. This one's a weird one. Maybe you'd have some insights on this, actually. We could open this up. Is ever since I was a kid, I've kind of always known what I wanted to do, like on some intuitive level. Like I've always loved fiction. I've always loved art, larger than life. Teaching always appealed to me. Like the things I'm doing now, if I look back, are what I told my mom I want to do when I was older. It was like, she'd be like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like Batman. It's like, obviously I'm not Batman, but it's like just creative storytelling and larger than life, like abstract fictional ideas have always appealed to me. Teaching has always appealed to me, like helping people, giving back. And it's so weird that from such a young age, like I knew that. And it's always been obvious to me. But then I talk to some people and they're like, I have no idea what I want to do. I just like have no idea. And they seem so lost. And this goes back to our North Star thing. Like you were kind of alluding to it, without clarity, there's just too many options. You don't know what you should do with your life. Like you need some level of clarity to eliminate a bunch of the options and say, head in this direction. Let it manifest in some way. Even like you were saying with spreadsheets, it has a cool way to look at it is, okay, you love spreadsheets. That doesn't mean you have to be a data analyst, but spreadsheets has like a certain domain of things to go in here. So now instead of looking at the whole world of choices, you have like this many choices.
Yeah.
But it's weird to me that I knew what I wanted from such a young age, but other people tend to not have that same experience. And it makes me wonder if they'd never had that experience or if they've never consciously thought about it. What do you think?
This is a really interesting one to unpack. I love that you're bringing this up. I do have a lot of thoughts. So I think we all feel that way. And I think we are conditioned as we get older to essentially not listen to it because we start editing in our brain. So I want to be a baseball player. I want to be, I like art. I want to be an artist, all of this stuff. And then as we get older, it's like, well, how do I make money at that? Oh, I can't, I can only make 40 grand a year doing that. So I'm going to go be a lawyer, or something like that. We start editing and to go back to the creative process. I think we feel that pull. And so we need to lead with that feeling. Like we need to tap into that feeling, but then we need to give ourselves space to explore how we might use those things to our advantage. Again, why I talk about advantage, in order to create a life where we are doing those things, right? So like my moment was always that I've talked about was, I think I'm a sophomore in college, taking some courses, don't really have a plan. I'm in the car with my dad and my dad's like, what are you going to do? Like, it's time. You need to decide what you're going to do. And I remember responding to him. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have a feeling I'm going to do a lot of different things and I'm going to find success. And basically now I'm somewhat of this like diversified entrepreneur who's done a bunch of different things, and I'm using those disparate experiences to help people. And I have multiple income streams. And like, I didn't know how that was going to manifest. I didn't know how I was going to do that. It's taken me a lot of exploration to figure it out. So I think the key is we can't squash that feeling.
Yeah.
We have to believe in that feeling, but then we have to give ourselves, like we have to be patient with ourselves and give ourselves sort of that, 20% of our time or 30% of our time to be open and explore how we could do that and not shut those things off and not edit them down. And then once you realize, at least I did, like we have way more options. And this is kind of what you were saying. We have way more options than we give ourselves credit for. When you finally have that like mind explosion, then yes, we do need clarity and we need a way to edit down. But first we need to diverge and we need to really leave the space open. So this is like a design thinking concept, right? Diverge to create ideas, converge to make choices. And so I think going through that and getting your mindset of being able to do that and not everything's linear, hopefully would help us get us there faster. And I think, again, you kind of went through that loop of knowing what you want to do, being off your path, feeling that anxiety, feeling that disconnect, then reconnecting and pursuing a different path, and then finding what was wrong with that and recalibrating. That's kind of the course that I think everybody goes on, but nobody thinks that way.
Right. Yeah, no, it's very true. That's the kind of like trite but true advice of, your 20s are for experimentation is what people would say. Like I'll tell a story actually of one of my friends a couple of years ago. He was in a long-term relationship and he comes to me and says, I don't know if this is the one. There's like half of me thinks she is, and the other half of me has like one foot out. And I'm worried that if I leave her, I'm making the biggest mistake of my life. But if I stay with her, I'm settling. So he was like very much on the fence about it, right? And he ended up staying with her for quite a few years. After that conversation him and I had, and we had a version of that conversation more and more over the years. But one thing that I said to him, and that he really helped me like internalize, was I said, well, at some point you like need to either accept like a choice and just like commit, or you need to eliminate the question altogether. So what I said to him was like, okay, let's say you guys did break up and for a year you went and did your own thing you could maybe lose her in the process. And then in the process, you realize you do want to be with her forever, but she's moved on. At least now you have your answer. Like, yes, you lose her, but now you don't have that answer for the question for the rest of your life. And I think that's important for people to do, is a lot of times they're like stuck between 2 or 3 or 4 choices. Like, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, just fucking do something. Like, pick one. Just like, it doesn't even matter if you do or don't like it. Eliminate the choice altogether. So whether it's like dating, business, even like hobbies, even trying different flavors of ice cream, you know what I mean? It's like, we'll try one and at least like either figure out if that's a yes or a no. And now you have one less question that you have to worry about. And for some reason, I think people in their early 20s have a very hard time going through with that like divergent elimination process. Like, there's a lot of resistance to it emotionally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's ultimately rooted in sort of perfectionism and our intolerance of failure. So it's perfectionism. It's also, we have this idea that opportunities are scarce, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we think if we get an opportunity, oh God, if we get 3 opportunities, I need to make the right decision. Like, this has to be the absolute right decision. And I think that's just false, because there's so many options. And so if you accept that it's false and that you have so many options, I think the one shortcut for this entire thing is, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Right?
Yeah,
like,
I really like
that's sort of the shortcut, but you have to believe that you have there's going to be another option. Because if you say no, and that's your only option, like, that is a really scary place to be. And so you have to have this sort of abundant mindset. You have to have already bought into that in order to use that, I think, that shortcut or that heuristic, which is kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, you do make a good point. It's like something you're kind of like saying without saying it, is until you live it, it's one of those things that like is very hard to internalize and truly be motivated by. Like, you and I have done the divergent process and actually been like, oh, if we like do this thing, and like nothing bad is going to happen. We can do it, and then we can figure out that we don't want to do it and move on. Where people that haven't explored that yet, for the experience to them is maybe more fearful. So that's
Right.
where I can imagine anything to do with life coaching or consulting must be very hard, because it's like trying to get people to do what they don't want to do.
Totally, exactly. But it's so much about mindset and psychology rather than skill or, aptitude or anything like that. Like, that's the thing. So I love diving into those concepts, because I think it's so helpful for people to hear, even you and I talking and trying to work through these issues still. Like, I'm going to always be working through this stuff. So I think it's really helpful. But I want to move on to like your vision of success. So having all of these experiences and getting on a better path and becoming more aligned, going back to your first quote that I read at the beginning, your kind of vision of success was, making $100,000 a year, right? Like, that was sort of a bar for you. Why was this your vision of success? Obviously the remote work part too, but.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, well, for one, it's a very like easy milestone. And I think culturally, we have this idea that if you make like $100K a year, you're at least like, your well-being is good and you're like desirable to like other people in society. I think that's why it tends to be like a very easy milestone. Like, hey, if you make 10K a month, like, you're probably going to be able to afford a decent place, go on trips. You're going to make enough money that like mates find you attractive. Like, it's just like that kind of like milestone I think everybody goes for. Once I hit it though, the thing that was interesting is like the hedonic adaptation. Like, you just want more.
Right.
Like, what I've really come to accept about being human is a lot of people are like hitting goals, I think, for external reasons, like external validation. Like, oh, I want to be liked by society. I want to do this. I want like people to think I'm the shit. I want to attract the girl. I want to get the Lambo. I want like the prestige, the power. And like, there's a lot of that, I think, internally that drives all of us in some different manifestation. But I just accepted that being human means you have to grow. Like, fundamentally, you have to have a problem or a struggle to work towards, or you will create one. Like Mark Manson's book, Everything is Fucked. Like, he talks about how we're living in the best time in human history, but for some reason, people think it's like the worst time in history culturally, and that everything's going to crap all the time. And it's because the human mind like wants peace, but needs a problem.
Yep.
So we always need some kind of problem to like be overcoming. So I like Mark Manson's idea of, why don't you just find like better problems or try to like create a life around better problems? So to me, the problem of we always need to grow is just solved by being like, there's always going to be a milestone. So like truly just actually love the journey, which is so trite, but it's like, hey, what do I enjoy solving? Like I enjoy learning about different things and breaking them down. Like right now, I'm trying to become a really good writer. I genuinely wake up like, oh, I want to learn how to be a better writer. I want to practice. I want to do it. And then once I become a good writer and that doesn't challenge me anymore, I need a different challenge. So then maybe it becomes, how do I monetize writing? How do we do the marketing? How do I build a brand? And that's an amazing challenge. And then that'll eventually get easy and become like subconscious. Then, I made 10 grand. Like, could I make 50 grand? And then that'll become the new milestone. Like once you believe in your capability to accomplish like pretty much anything you set your mind to, the milestones are more just guides of what you should do next and less like destinations you truly care to hit. Because you know you just need another one. So I guess this leads me to another really big nugget I'm learning as I approach 30, is I have this theory that for men at least, your 20s are motivated by a lack of, but if you do it correctly, your 30s and beyond are motivated by like an abundance of. And that's like a tilt I'm slowly going through, because I used to be really motivated, like I need to make 10K a month. Like I'm lacking confidence, I'm lacking resources. But then you start to have enough proof to say, oh, like I actually can accomplish this. I have some level of confidence. Like I'm making decent money. And now your motivation is gone because you're not lacking the things that motivated you in the first place. And this truly put me into like a quarter life crisis. Like I accomplished all my goals I set out to and was like, I did it, I guess. Like, what do I do now? And I remember for like a week, I was like literally depressed. I'm like, I just have no drive to do anything. Like I did it already. And I'm only like a quarter way through my life. Like, what the hell? So that's when I finally realized like, well, I need another, like, I need more emotion to like move me, because emotion leads to motion, like classic Tony Robbins right there. So that's where my theory is like, well, once you have like, you eliminate the lack. Well, now what do you just like want to pursue for its own sake? What problem is meaningful that you want to like continue to solve? Like what level of transformation do you want to go down next? Because there's an infinite amount of problems you could solve and an infinite amount of things you could do. Just choose the ones that are like meaningful to you and are actually fun or you enjoy on like some level. And that's kind of like the newest way I view it.
Yeah, I like your way of using money as a milestone, not the success itself. Because like when you get to the spot that you were just described, there's kind of two ways to do it. You can either just continue to level up the number if that was your true purpose, or you can find a better problem to solve. And that's, kind of where your path or what you're thinking about, I think, to drive that emotion instead of just, well, I already did this, so do I just up the number? That can always be part of it. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but in your backstory, we've only gotten music producer and college professor. So I want you to, if you would, talk to us about transitioning from this college professor. Let's wrap up this tweet that I read. This college professor, you essentially became a ghostwriter, online entrepreneur. Talk to us a little bit about what a ghostwriter is, how you got into doing that. Was there a particular moment? Like what was this transition?
Yeah. So ghostwriting kind of like fell on my lap, actually. Like when I said I met Liam Kircher, he was like, dude, you got to get on Twitter. Like you're a teacher, you've read like hundreds of books, you have all this knowledge. Like you have to get on Twitter and you have to start posting every day. And I was like, fuck, I don't know, man. Like I don't want to talk about like politics and all this stuff. Right. Like I don't even like use Twitter. And he was like, trust me, man, it'll change your life. So I decided to like start posting on Twitter. He was stoked about it and retweeted me. And then this guy, Dakota Robertson, seen it and he checked out my profile and seen that I live in Kelowna, which is where he lives, like up in Canada. And then we started chatting and he was a ghostwriter. So through like a bunch of happenstance, he ended up like pitching me just like, hey man, do you want to like learn how to be a ghostwriter? And I was like, I don't know anything about ghostwriting. And like, how much is it? And he like gave me a price and I'm like, well, if I want to make 10K a month online, like he's already done it. So I might as well just like shoot my shot. And shot my shot and just like ran with it, failed miserably a crap ton of times. But I ended up getting to 10K a month in, I think, 30 days after I signed that deal with him. And I got to like 40K a month in like 4 to 6 months. The timelines are a little foggy now after telling these so many times. But I think it was like 4 to 6 months. And then even crazier was like a couple months ago, I ended up making like 100K in 30 days, which like at one point I was like, that's all I ever wanted was to make like 10K a month and 100K a year. And then I made that in like 30 days and was like, what the, this is crazy. Like it just snowballed like so fast. And that's kind of where I'm at now, is still running the ghostwriting agency, but I am stepping away from it and basically bringing a new CEO on to like run it while I move into the next stage of the adventure. As I talked about, there's always just another thing to do.
Yeah.
So ghostwriting for me, I feel that journey is getting close to being completed and I'm ready to move to the next thing.
So ghostwriting, for anybody that doesn't know what that means, you're essentially paid to write on behalf of clients. That could be, it could be books, it could be articles, it could be lots of different things. In your case, it was really a lot of Twitter content, I'm assuming, right?
Yep. Twitter, LinkedIn. More recently, it's moving into like YouTube scripts and things like that as well. But yeah, just like content in general. I consider us more like a content marketing agency now than a ghostwriter, but yeah, definitely just writing for other people's personal brands and businesses on socials.
So you mentioned you failed a whole bunch in the beginning, yet you still had success very quickly, in my estimation. That's pretty darn quick to have some success. And you recently wrote, this is one of my favorite tweets of yours from recent days here. Don't beat yourself up for the mistakes you made when you didn't know any better. So what is your relationship with failure? Like, how do you think about failure?
It's changed a lot over the years. I think I have to like talk about how I view success, because failure would be like this, I guess, is my inverse model of it.
Yeah.
I think everyone views success like truly as a destination, but I had this one real estate coach back in the day who used to tell me success is leased. It's never like earned or owned. And I like, the older I get, the more I think about that, because like success, you're only successful for as long as you can sustain the destination. Like if you think about it, like there's people that have become billionaires and you're like, wow, that person is wildly successful. And then they lose it all in like one bad gamble, or like, wasn't there some kind of like crypto guy who was like a billionaire and he lost it all a couple months ago?
Sam Bankman-Fried. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a prime example. Is like, is he still successful? Are we saying he was successful? Is he still successful now? Like when you think about it, like success is more of a time horizon than a destination. So the question that I always ask myself is like, okay, it's not about accomplishing something once. It's about sustaining that success as long as humanly possible, because the game is not over till it's over. So the way I view business is until you officially like exit the market, close the business or sell out, you are never successful, because at any point a competitor could wipe you out. Like think about ChatGPT coming and completely disrupting Google. And now Google's like, the red alarm is going off. They're like, we have a competitor that could actually take our market share. So it's like, are we going to say Google is successful? Like 10 years from now, if ChatGPT takes their market share, we'll have the story of Google was successful and they reigned over this time horizon. So when I think about failure, I think there's a lot of like little failures every day that happen. Like even just with clients, maybe you don't communicate with a client enough. Maybe for a particular week of time, content doesn't do as well as you hoped. Maybe there's even a month where content in the ghostwriting perspective doesn't do as well as you hoped. So like my success as a ghostwriter is only as relevant as how long I can sustain it for. So there's like the little failures in between that you're like, that sucks. And then you pivot and you come back. And then there's like the true, we'll say quote unquote failures where you lose everything and you're like seen differently afterwards.
Was there any point in those failures working with Dakota where you thought you couldn't do it, or you had to get over some mental hurdle with a failure? Because again, I'm just thinking about timeline and how quickly, right, in this cycle of getting over failures in order to keep learning and growing and ultimately get to success. It's never a straight line.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's never a straight line for sure. I don't think there was ever a moment where I said I was going to quit because I wanted the remote job way too badly.
Okay.
Like, I was, a lot of my big motivation for doing it was when I was growing up, my dad worked out of town a lot. And I remember, like, I heard this from my mom that there was one birthday when I was very young. I don't even remember this, where my dad was working out of town because he wanted to give my brother and I this really incredible life. And he wasn't there for my birthday. So he called to say happy birthday. And like, I told him I was mad at him and wouldn't talk to him because he wasn't there. Now, like, as a kid, you don't understand, but like, now that I'm older and I'm looking back on it, I'm like, man, how must that have felt to be my dad and to be told, like, you're doing this thing and like sacrificing for your family, and they're just like mad at you for it. So like, a big part of my motivation is to create a business and a brand that is defensible over a long period of time, has high points of leverage. So when I have kids, I'm able to spend more time with them and not miss the important moments while still giving them the life that, you know, my dad had kind of wanted for me.
Right.
So I call it like the upgraded version of my parents' plan. Is what's like the new age, like more modern version of that irons out the kinks that my dad experienced. And then I'll have my own kinks and maybe my kids will iron those out. But to me, like that motivator was like so core that like there was no way I was going to quit. Like my why to do it was way too strong. But there certainly was moments where I felt like very kicked down. One of my buddies, Landon, he says entrepreneurship is about being able to sustain the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in the same day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, he's so right. Because there's been a couple times with clients where a whole month of content just like bombs and they're just like not happy. And I'm like, frick, what am I going to do? But then like another client is super happy. So you have this like positive moment contrasted with this negative moment within like the same hour. And that just continues to happen. So I look at the failures as if you have the strong enough reason to persist, like you'll just keep going. Like if you read A Man's Search for Meaning and Viktor Frankl can survive a Nazi concentration camp, you can survive a little bit of failures.
Seriously.
Like it's,
yep.
We're going back to what we said with like, you know, proofs that it's possible. If that's proof that humans can survive things like that, we can survive any problems that's thrown at us in like the modern age. Now it's just about kicking yourself like back up. Like the solution to me from failure is to what I call outcome think. So like when a failure happens, you can either attach it to your identity and say like, I'm a failure, like, oh, this happens. You kind of like wallow in it and like have this sorrow. And sometimes you need to just let yourself do it for a bit to like process the emotion. But then it's like, okay, like what's the solution? Like, are we just going to accept the failure and let the client go? Or are we going to run damage control? Or are we going to go double time? Are we going to offer free work? Like, let's just like get this emotion out of the way and just like have a solution, pitch it, negotiate it, and then let's just get back on track. And that's over the years, I try to shortcut the emotional negatives and just get to the outcome.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
I've been recently thinking about the SpaceX rocket that just blew up like yesterday, right? And there's so many people that are like, oh, it's a failure. But if you listen to the clip, everybody in the room when it blows up, which is the control room, these are all SpaceX employees, they're cheering.
Yeah.
And it's like they have an entire different mindset about it. Like blowing up a rocket, they learned something. And they're going to go do it again and again. And so I think about like, what are the rockets we're willing to blow up, right? In our lives.
That's good.
As progress. Because SpaceX is continuing to launch rockets where NASA shut down the shuttle program, you know, like it's just two different mindsets. And so having that healthy relationship with failure as learning, getting through the emotion, like you said, and getting to solution and closing that loop much faster is how you make progress. And so many people, you know, we're so, as a society, like we're so comfortable, right? And we're so used to no variation, no volatility in what we do. And that's something that I think we have to reprogram into ourselves.
For sure. Like one quick thought that you just made me think on that is like you kind of inversed my model of success. And I for some reason, I've never thought of it that way is, you're only as much as a failure as long as failure is sustained.
Right.
So like,
so rip
so
through
it's
it.
like both. Yeah. Rip through it. Like, sustain your failures for like as short as possible and your successes for as long as possible. Yeah. I like that.
All right. I want to switch gears and ask you some rapid fire questions. And then I want to, end our conversation talking a little bit about freedom for a minute. So rapid fire questions, real fast, or, as fast as you want to go here. So is there a recent, author, thought leader, or influencer that you come across that has really gotten your attention that you're paying attention to?
Gurwinder Bogle, actually. These answers will definitely be different than the first time. Gurwinder Bogle is, he's like a Twitter account who's like a deep thinker on like narratives and has some really cool contrarian views that I think are very interesting. I could just read his stuff and think about it for days. So I'd say he's like the one that I'm paying the most attention to right now.
Awesome. Are you reading a book right now, or have you read one recently that's really influenced you?
Actually, I'm reading Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky right now.
Yeah.
And going with a bit more of like a fictional take, and I'm deconstructing how he does his characters, because in like literature, people say he's one of the greatest like psychological writers of all time. And it's interesting to read how he writes characters with so much psychological depth. So it's been a fun ride so far.
All right. As a 29-year-old young buck, do you have one piece of advice for someone that is just making their way in their world right now?
Yeah, I would say get clarity on what you want. I noticed that almost every consulting call that I do, where people like hit me up for consulting, or someone that I talk to who's struggling, they just have not enough clarity on where they want to go. So they have no idea what they should be doing. I think clarity, and if you don't have it, you need to start experimenting to at least like eliminate some of those options as soon as possible.
Yeah. I love that idea of elimination. All right. A lot of negativity in the world. We got tech layoffs. We got a lot of stuff going on, financial markets or whatever. What's something that's got you excited about for the next 12 months?
My girlfriend and I are going to Miami in the Bahamas on like a vacation. That I'm very excited for on just more like a personal level. This is what I would say to anyone though, who's struggling with like all the fear in the world, all the stuff is like, it's never been any different. I think everyone looks at it as if it's like just now, like back in hunter-gatherer times, there's a lot of fear. Back when people like lived in tribes, there's a lot of fear, like of predators, of like rival clans. And now there's like still a lot of fear. I think people think that we're, as humans, like, oh, we've overcome the survival struggle, so things should just be good. I think the survival struggle has just been replaced with the well-being struggle. And you should do whatever you can to sustain your well-being over the longest time horizon. Like back in the day, if weather came and wiped out the crops, it's like, oh crap, we might die. Nowadays, when the economy changes and wipes out a bunch of jobs, people are like, well, what the heck? It's like, well, if your crops are gone, like you got to move. It's like, what are you going to do? Like to increase your well-being. So I try to look at it kind of the same way that a hunter-gatherer would when they're trying to survive, but I just replace survival with well-being. And I think adaptability is the best way to survive it and like increase your well-being. Just be adaptable, be fluid.
Yeah, I love that. I think about the words resilience and optimization, and focusing more on resilience as opposed to optimization for any one thing, like the CrossFit athlete, right? Be ready for anything kind of thing. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I really like that. And it's more foundation. It's like a foundational layer so that you can think about, all right, well, what are the skills that I need to build? What are the things that I need to do in order to be more adaptable? I love that.
Yep.
All right. I want to close up with this topic of freedom, because you've created a bunch of freedom in your life. There's obviously trade-offs to that, but I think the number one thing I get said to me by people that want to make a career change or make a break or whatever is, I just want freedom. I want to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And I think that leads to, you wrote about the paradox of choice, which I want to talk about a little bit, but like this idea that freedom is not, we don't have clarity over freedom. And so one of the things I really liked about you was you kind of broke down different types of freedom in a Twitter thread. And I was wondering if you could just expand on the different types of freedom. So you had location freedom, you had time freedom, financial freedom, and you had opportunity freedom.
Yeah. So I would say, by the way, I don't know how loud that is in the background. I think the guy I'm staying with is just like pouring a bowl of something.
Don't hear it.
Okay. Okay. So location freedom, the ability to live almost anywhere. Time freedom, how much time do you have? I would say location freedom is based on your ability to work a job remotely. Time freedom is based on your ability to deploy leverage. And then financial freedom. Yeah, like financial freedom and opportunity. Financial freedom, I think, is actually the hardest one of all of them to achieve. And you have to define what financial freedom looks like to you. Like, is it to be able to do literally anything at any time? You're going to need a lot of money to do that. Right. So I've never actually done that analysis. I'd get clear on what that number is and then find ways to do it, which is probably through investments and building businesses. I don't see any other way you'd hit that level of money. As for like freedom of opportunity, I think that comes from a combination of all the other ones. If you can work anywhere, well, then you can be anywhere. If you like make good money, then more doors are open to you. Cause like, for example, my girlfriend's like, hey, we should go to EDC in November. And it's like, if I don't really have the money, like I can't just fly to another country and go to this festival with her. Or even us going to the Bahamas in Miami is only possible because I make enough money and I'm able to work remotely. So I can just go and she can surf all day while I work. So those opportunities come from the acquiring of resources. And I would say network, because with network, you get offered more opportunities. And the last one that I would say too, that relates to mating and opportunities is the more fit you are and the more resources you have as like a man, you're probably going to have more mating opportunities if that's something that's important to you. So when people say they want freedom, it's one of those things where it's like, well, like you have to define what freedom means. Like again, it comes back to clarity. Like clarity is just so important. Like what kind of freedom do you want? And then what are you willing to sacrifice to get it? I think is the next most important question, because that determines your vehicle or your means. So let's say that you wanted to make like $50,000 a month is like your level of freedom, where you're like, okay, if I do this, I have like so much freedom. But then in accomplishing 50,000 a month, you don't have time freedom because you're doing everything yourself. You're too like, you have a lack of leverage. Well, now you have to change the medium to get location freedom, financial freedom, and time freedom by deploying leverage. So once you like know what kind of freedom you want and you're clear on it, that will determine your means and what you have to do to get it. So I think it's a very important question to get clear on.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because freedom, if you don't have clarity, it leads to that paradox of choice, which is something that you wrote about so well. This idea that when you have so many options, it's actually harder to make decisions. You get more anxiety and you face more uncertainty. And we've talked a lot about ways to whittle that list down, right? And I mean, obviously one is clarity, asking the right questions. The question that I use with people all the time is, what are you willing to give up? So people that I talk to a lot are in their 40s, they have families, they have homes, and they want to do something completely different. And I'm like, well, okay, so you want to go open a yoga studio? Well, are you going to move out of your $1 million house in order to take that risk off the table? Are you going to quit the country club? Or like, what are these things that you're willing to give up? Because you can absolutely go do that. But if you're not willing to give up certain things, then that eliminates choice for you, and we have to go in a different direction. Yeah.
No, 100%, man. It's an iteration on kind of my take on that too is, what are you willing to give up? Like for me, here, I'll share a story is I've had 2 opportunities come up that were very enticing. I had one where a guy was like, hey, I really love what you're doing with the ghostwriting front. I've scaled a lot of businesses. I have the team and the resources to do it. How do you feel about partnering and we scale your agency to 1 million a month? That's really enticing. That's kind of like a Shark Tank level offer where you have a guy who's already done it multiple times to exits. It's like, hey, let's do this together. I'll walk you through it. I'll provide the clientele, the lead flow, and revamp your systems and do the hiring and management. It's kind of like, fuck, that's a really good offer. That's enticing. Like $1 million a month is on the table, like as gross revenue for the business. And I thought about it for quite a while. And then I was like, hey, like, I'm not going to, because I think the trade-off is too dire. Like it's going to involve so much time. It's not going to give me the level of freedom that I need. It's not going to be high leverage because I'm going to be doing service based. It's going to revolve me being very active. I said, as much as the money is really good, that's not the way that I want to accomplish that level of money. Like my North Star, as I said, is like when I have kids, I will have time to spend with my kids and not be just like locked into this business. So then when I thought about it more, I'm like, okay, what accomplishes that? Okay, it's high leverage productization, communities, personal branding that creates opportunities. That's where my time has to go, not towards building this service-based business. So you're so right. Like there's a lot of ways to hit a goal, but what you're willing to give up defines your method for how you'll hit it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story. I love it. I mean, yeah, it highlights your long range thinking, how you're tapped into not your goal for the next year, but your goals for creating a life well lived. And I think that's what I love about you. And what I've really respected coming to get to know you, is that type of thinking. I think it's fantastic. Will you, let our audience know where they can find you and find more about you online and keep up with all this great stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Twitter right now at Taylin Simmonds is definitely the main place to find me. That's going to be like the cornerstone of me launching, growing my newsletter once I really start putting that into the fold, launching communities. I will be expanding onto LinkedIn and then Instagram, but very much taking it one platform at a time, focusing on the mastery. So Twitter is definitely the best place to find me right now.
Excellent. We'll make sure we have links to everything that we talked about in the show notes. My final question is, I'm a huge fan of the Bahamas and I know you're going there. Do you know where you're going, where you're going to be?
NASA is the one that we're going to go to because we can take a boat to Harbor Islands if we decide to. But I did also look at Freeport. I was going to go to Freeport just to hit the, Lusayan National Park? Looks pretty sick. Yeah. But it seemed like that was like the main fun thing to do there. And I'm like, I think the other islands might have some more fun stuff. But what's your take? I'd love some recommendations.
My family loves the Atlantis Resort on Paradise Island, right off of Nassau. Yeah. So we've gone there. I've been there a whole bunch. It's great. You could go there for a day pass. You can check out the aquariums and stuff like that. They have a pretty good beach out there as well. What I love about the Bahamas is the people are so great and so nice. Like we take the city bus everywhere, just great people. And I think that's been the biggest thing for endearing us to that place. The other one is there's the Ocean Club on Paradise Island also. It's got a couple great restaurants. It's a really low key, like couples kind of place, more adult centric type place. There's a golf course there, but like we just go and we usually always hit that for to get something to eat for a nice sit down dinner. But yeah, just a relaxing place. I've got a couple of Bahamas hats that say ocean and I wear them all the time on podcasts and people are always asking me what that is. And it's got the Bahamas flag in the middle, but so we love that place. So nice. I hope you have an awesome time.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll definitely look into some of those recommendations because we booked the Miami part, but we haven't booked the Bahamas part yet. So that's what we're looking into, but I'm excited to go swimming with the pigs. That's my number one right now.
Yeah. I haven't done it, but I know people that have, and it's kind of a hoot, bunch of pigs swimming in the ocean. Well, Taylin, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It was great to catch up with you again, and best of luck. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, likewise, Mike. That was super fun. Second time around. Talking about some familiar stuff, but also some new stuff too. So I appreciate you bringing me on again. It was super fun.
Awesome, man. We'll talk to you soon.